This is how you might remember the co-op in recent decades, all dividend numbers and co-op stamps. But the Belfast Co-Operative Society, or the BCS, was formed in 1888 by the coming together of 200 people, not on York Street, as you might have expected, but operating out of a small shop on the Shankill Road. In keeping with the ethos of the cooperative movement, the business was obviously to be run by the people for the people. The building to which Nigel has alluded and the subject of this evening's talk did not come about on York Street until 1909, when the movement approached the architects Hill and Kennedy to design a new emporium which would reflect the success and the community spirit of the society. Here we have the provisions or grocery department as it would have appeared in 1914, which is a good time to start for the opening or the beginning of the First World War. And this is where Arnold Hayden would have sold his wares. The site for the new building on York Street had formerly been the original tobacco factory of Thomas Gallagher. He had arrived in Belfast from Templemoyle in Derry in 1863 and soon became one of the most prominent tobacco plantation owners and tobacco manufacturers in the world. And here you can see some of the Gallagher products from the First World War on the right-hand side. This business, of course, moved to a new colossal manufactory further down York Street following the disposal of his original premises to the co-op. And there is the link with Thomas Gallagher and the co-op. So why did the BCS choose York Street? In the early years of the 20th century, unlike today, excuse me, this was one of the prime retail and manufacturing thoroughfares coming into the city. Thousands of people arrived daily via the terminus of the Belfast and Northern County Railways at York Street, which you see here. And of course, at that stage, there was also a hotel in the background there, which became the Midland Hotel. This is the original Midland Hotel just over here, before it was destroyed in the Blitz and replaced by what we remember as the Midland Hotel. In addition to the rail services, of course, the Belfast Corporation Tramways also had a departure area where the trams, as you can see, came into this section here, and the guests could move quite easily from the train station onto the trams and hence down York Street and into Belfast. The thoroughfare, of course, of York Street could easily be accessed by the extensive tram network, which I mentioned earlier there, radiating out from Castle Junction or Castle Place, which had been electrified in 1905. That's the tramway system, not Castle Place, of course. So York Street was chosen, as any large business would do today, for its infrastructure, accessibility, and transport links. So basically, what we're talking all about is volume. The Co-op building in which the War Memorial was erected in 1920, and that is, of course, the first War Memorial to the First World War. The building was built in 3 stages. Stage 1 in 1909, as can be seen from this photograph taken in 1914. I think this photograph particularly beautifully captures the prosperity of Belfast as one of the leading manufacturing cities of the British Empire, certainly in Edwardian times and before the outbreak of the First World War. Just looking at the photograph itself, this is the first section of the co-op. The second building down is the former Gallagher's tobacco factory. It would be the Gallagher's at this stage, when this photograph was taken, had moved down. And if you look very carefully, just behind the tram there, you can see the tower of his new tobacco manufactory. The tall chimney, just in between there, if you can see it, is that of the York Street Flax Spinning Company. So this gives a picture, I think, a beautiful picture of Belfast in its prosperous times. Site 2, which was part of Nigel's presentation, our stage 2, was completed in 1912. Even with the upheaval caused by the First World War, as can be seen in this photograph where the original Gallagher factory has been demolished, which is just here, you saw that in the previous slide, and replaced by the start of the central section of the proposed new building. So we're now on to stage 2 of the building. The co-op moved down York Street as buildings became available and leases, etc. were sorted out. So this is stage 2 of the building, in which the First War Memorial would be placed. Here's the building finally completed in 1914, as seen in this publicity shot produced for the BCS in 1926. So the history of the co-op is intrinsically linked with that of the duration of the First World War. We were talking about earlier about which main entrance that Nigel had mentioned would possibly have been the the place where the First World War Memorial was placed, and it is my opinion, and Nigel's, that this was the main entrance. There were 3 access points to the building. This was what we assume was the main entrance, and it's here that we think the First World War Memorial was placed. The new building, to which the BCS were understandably proud, was quite unlike the linen warehouses that had come up to the fore during the Victorian era, such as Robinson and Cleaver and Anderson Macaulay. Although we remember these as department stores, the Belfast Co-Operative Society conceived the concept of individual departments in a purpose-built structure, where the former linen warehouses only adapted their buildings to what we know as department stores, and that would have taken place in the 1920s. So very much this building was much more modern in its concept than the previous linen warehouses that existed from 1888 onwards, such as Robinson and Cleaver. This unique photograph of the building, taken in 1947, so we're jumping ahead slightly, followed the destruction of much of York Street, of course, during the Blitz of 1941. The destruction of these buildings gives us much more opportunity to look at the main building itself, because of course they have been flattened and cleared away at this stage. We can see the main entrance, which led to where the 1920 War Memorial was placed, i.e. the middle main entrance to the main building, completed in 1914. The next major extension to the Co-op was, of course, the Orpheus Building of 1932. This was in the Art Deco period, and the building was the most modern of the modern. It not only provided additional floor space, but gave the society one of the most celebrated social entertainment spaces in 20th century Belfast, and that, of course, was the Orpheus Ballroom, or the Ballroom of Romance. The ballroom was actually on the very top floor of the building. The ground floor was given over, of course, to retail. So to access the ballroom, which is right at the top floor, you had to use this main staircase, which is just where the cursor is now. And that was through the main entrance of the Orpheus Building, right up to the top. And this, again, is the staircase here. These photographs were just taken in 2015, just before the building was demolished. You will see the stained glass windows just here. Okay, so it was on the first floor of the Orpheus Building that the Second War Memorial, i.e. the joint war memorial to the First World War and the Second World War, was placed. Nigel has found out that it was an 8x4 large, so it was quite an enormous large metal plate, which was attached to the walls just up on the first floor of the Orpheus Building. So this is where we assume at this stage in 1958, when it was unveiled in this building, the Orpheus Building, that the other original First World War Memorial was then removed out of the other building, which was the main building, which you can see here in the background of where the Orpheus is being built. That's my opinion. If it wasn't removed, where did it go? We don't know. And when was it removed? I'll come to the next part of the story. This photograph, taken in 1969, shows us what happened to the original building during a refurbishment of 1965. The towers were shorn off, the exterior and the interiors dramatically and drastically altered, and the entire building clad in chocolate brown plastic panels. Perhaps Mr. Holmes would let us know later the thinking that was behind us. What you have to remember, of course, it was the 60s. Things like this were considered modern. And the Co-op, of course, followed suit by placing the original building in these chocolate-covered panels. And that is probably, the Co-op on the right-hand side is the building that we remember going to until 1972. But of course, then this happened. The entire original central building was destroyed in the terrorist bombing on May the 10th, 1972. Many people have thought that this building, which was destroyed, was a different one to the original building. But of course, it's exactly the same one. If you look closely at the photograph on the right-hand side, you will see the walls of the original building being slowly exposed during demolition, which took place in June 1972. So, if the original War Memorial, i.e. the 1921, had been still in this building at that stage when it was destroyed, it surely would have been destroyed too. So, we are concluding that the First World War Memorial was removed out of that building at some stage in the 50s or the 60s when it was modernized, or perhaps as early as 1958 when the new War Memorial went into the Orpheus Building. Finally, where did all these artifacts go? Well, the next time you're walking down Hill Street in the Cathedral Quarter, take a look at the outside of the new Harp Bar. It is the new Harp Bar. The original Harp Bar doesn't exist anymore. And you will see attached to the outside wall many of the plaques that were used to adorn the first floor foyer of the Orpheus Building. And this is where we are assuming and think that the original 8x4 Joint World War Memorial was also placed, and these would have been plaques to the memorial of many of the principals of the co-op on that floor. Sadly, the 1957 Joint Memorial is not amongst them. I spoke to a contact today who actually is involved with the Harp Bar. These were acquired at an auction, a random auction. The owner was obviously obsessed with the Orpheus Building because if you look on the right-hand side, he also bought the stained glass panels which were on the staircase of the Orpheus Building. And if you trip the light, fantastic, the original sprung maple floor of the Orpheus Ballroom of Romance has been installed partially on the 3rd floor of the Harp Bar building as well. So that's really my slant on the co-op. I hope you enjoyed it, and certainly I'm very happy to open the floor for any questions you may have.